From the research that we've done with experts, with anti-poaching units, as well as from our local informants, we know that this is pangolin terrain. But this creature is very, very rarely sighted. It seems that more pangolins are found with poachers than roaming free in the wild. Although we tried to find one, our efforts were fruitless. Mostly nocturnal, shy and solitary, they are extremely elusive. And sightings of them in the wild are becoming increasingly rare because they might already be on the brink of extinction. We are travelling to Zanin to attend the trial of an alleged pangolin poacher. For this investigation, we have partnered with conservationist Alexis Creel.
It's a species I'm entirely committed to and will continue to do whatever I can to protect them.
In Zanin, we decide to conduct an impromptu survey of a cross-section of residents to find out how many actually know anything about the pangolin. It isn't only sightings of pangolins that are a challenge. Public awareness also needs to be raised.
Have you ever heard of an animal called a pangolin?
No.
A scaly anteater?
No.
A huara?
No.
No. Itermego?
Oh yes, I heard.
So what does it mean?
So it's a bug or something, I don't know.
It's a bug?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not much though.
We went on the magazine
Yeah.
and then the
The
TV.
TV, yeah, the animal programs, but as for what it
A pangolin is a unique animal. It doesn't. Haina ke ukamushito wa moto. Re ukamushito wa moto yaki hide. Yaki kutrisha, yaki folder, like a round ball.
I lived in the Kruger Park for 10 years, so I should know what a pangolin is.
Pangolin is a very strange animal. Children can grow up without knowing it. And then when it's there, they will call the elders to come and pick it up. Normally they pick it up in a sack. And if it sees people, it will hide like a tortoise, they say. And then where they take that pangolin, nobody knows. Then you can grow up being an elderly person without knowing the pangolin. Yes, it's a very special animal.
In Xitsonga, when we talk of Sekwari, we talk of an animal that only appears during the drought. Immediately it appears, they will kill it. After killing it, they will take all the rags from the village, take them to the river, pour its blood there, and do some traditional ceremony, and rain will come.
The pangolin falls in, together with lion and elephants as just one of those iconic creatures. There's something about the actual character of the animal that draws it into folklore, that then draws it into the traditional medicine market, which I think is beautiful. It's part of the culture.
For centuries, pangolins have been used in both African and Asian traditional medicine. But it is evident that there is being a worrying shift from the small-scale harvesting of pangolins for healing purposes to a greater commodification of the species that is unsustainable for its survival.
People that are doing it in a traditional way and understand the use and living with the land and living with the animals and with the plants, do it in a way so that it is there for the next generation and the next generation. And unfortunately that is busy dying out.
Yeah, I think there's been a huge turn of foot in the last 10 years. Asian traditional medicine has got many thousands of years of history, a documented history of using pangolins as some sort of remedy to cure many spiritual and medical ailments. The problem is the 4 Asian species are reaching critical low levels, and they're very difficult to find on the ground. So just exactly the same as the Asian rhino and Asian elephant, they're sourcing for an easier commodity on the African continent.
And you have a middleman that's tapping into that and saying to them, okay, I'll pay you, I have a market, and they don't care if it survives or doesn't survive.
The multi shops, they've started operating many years ago, and I think we've been turning a blind eye for so many years. But I can tell you now that after we've received information that people are trading with these species at multi-markets, we're busy developing a project at a national level.
During our investigation, we visited several muti markets and were offered a live pangolin from Mozambique by a middleman for tens of thousands of rands. The middleman also gave us a gift, a pangolin foot. We took it to the National Zoological Gardens in Pretoria to be tested. Here, groundbreaking scientific research is being conducted into the pangolin that will have an enormous impact on the future survival of the species. Using forensic technology such as DNA barcoding, which entails scraping and cleaning off the cells from the scales to reveal the pure DNA, scientists are now able to identify the pangolin as belonging to a particular species.
In South Africa, us being the National Zoo, we are the only zoo with a research department with a dedicated responsibility by government to conduct research.
Through genetic profiling, these scientists can identify not only the specific pangolin species, but the geographical origin of confiscated body parts and scales. This is essential to build up a database on a species that is over 80 million years old, but about which so little is known, even how many are still alive.
We never realized that pangolins are the most trafficked animal in the world. And with that came this realization, we have no idea what's happening in South Africa.
A few weeks after conducting tests on the pangolin foot we handed into the laboratory for testing, we received confirmation that it originates from a ground temic or Cape pangolin that is indigenous to South and Southern Africa.
Using genetics, you can also make the link between where an animal is being poached and linking that to a suspect's clothes. If there's a blood spatter or anything, or even on a knife, we will have that technology to say, but this was a pangolin killed specifically by that person.
But as we know from the transnational rhino horn, lion bone and ivory scourge, pangolin parts and meat are traded to service a growing consumer market, primarily in Asia. And the illegal trade thrives beyond borders.
We became aware of a big confiscation that came from a Central African country through our Durban port, and then it went to Hong Kong. It was seized in Hong Kong. So the concern of the South African government was, is it Cape pangolins? Is it one of our pangolin species that's being traded? So we contacted the Hong Kong authorities, and they were very happy to give us subsets of the sample that was confiscated. It was a confiscation of 4+ tons, and they said then they will send us back 28 kilos. We had to treat it as forensic evidence.
Forensic tests confirmed that the illegal cargo contained a mixture of African and Asian species. But apart from arrests and confiscations that represent just the tip of the iceberg, how does one identify poaching hotspots?
The hotspot project, if I can call it like that, is going to take us some years. You need to get collaboration from the different countries. You need to get their buy-in.
We have a memorandum of understanding with Mozambique and Namibia, particularly, but not in pangolins itself, but it's a biodiversity agreement, but it includes issues relating to CITES and wildlife law enforcement.
But memorandums of understanding and neighbourly agreements are not worth the paper they are written on unless effectively implemented on the ground. Meanwhile, the transnational illegal trade in pangolins and other wildlife species is on the rise.
It was an animal that I hadn't ever seen in the wild, one that I'd wanted to see, of course, like everybody wants to see a pangolin. And this creature arrived and was put into my arms, this huge big ball. I didn't even know how to hold it, you know. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
Nikki Wright is the Executive Director of the African Pangolin Working Group, a non-profit organisation established in 2011 to research, raise awareness, rehabilitate pangolins rescued from poachers and release them back into the wild. It was Wright's work that motivated conservationist Alexis Creel to take on the pangolin's cause.
I was inspired, or rather pushed, to get involved when I saw a picture of a pangolin that had been confiscated from the trade, holding the hand of a wildlife rehabilitation person. It was actually Nikki Wright's hand. And he was holding her hand in such a human way, you know, with those beautiful pangolin claws, and licking water out of her palm with that lovely sticky long pangolin tongue.
For Creel, who hand-reared orphan pangolins at Sanga Lodge in the Central African Republic, this has become a personal quest.
You have a sense that things are slowly moving into place and that we could win the war against the extinction of the species for essentially what, again, is the indulgence of a pangolin fetus in a plate of soup.
At the CITES COP17 Wildlife Conference held in Johannesburg during September 2016, member countries voted unanimously to uplist the pangolin from Appendix 2, restricted trade, to Appendix 1, a total ban on all trade. This was a major victory for the pangolin and the conservation world.
If we act fast and now, while countries have participated in these proposals, and start to engage with countries directly in following through with the uplisting, then we can work with this CITES legislation to improve protection. But the legislation in and of itself is only legislation. So it now depends on us, and in a sense, the hard work starts now.
But knowledge of the species is still very limited. What is known is that pangolins cannot survive for long in captivity. And like all animals rescued from the illegal wildlife trade, they require specialized care.
They're a very specialized mammal. So there are certain specialized techniques and husbandry and handling methods that you need to know about pangolin. So it's where to keep it, how to keep it quiet, to cover it with a blanket, to keep it in a strong place where it can't climb out through a window or, you know, force open a door, to stop people looking at it. You know, just all those initial first aid tips, I suppose.
The African Pangolin Working Group has also partnered with the Pretoria Zoological Gardens to provide specialized high care facilities for rescued pangolins.
The first stage at the zoo will be the initial high care stage. Once the animal is stabilized and strong enough, it will then move up to Makalali, where we'll have a pangorarium, which is a specialized pangolin keeping facility. And we'll have trained personnel on site to do the next phase of the rehab.
Special assignment travelled to Makalali Private Game Reserve near Kruger Park. Here, the Back to the Wild release facility treats and monitors rescued animals before releasing them back into their natural habitat. We were shown around by ecologist Audrey Delsink, who runs the facility and is also at the forefront of conservation research.
We actually set up a number of release enclosures of various shapes and sizes to accommodate different species that would come in. So we would facilitate a slow release process, which would be that last phase before they then get released back into the wild. We have got a proposed site for the enclosure for the pangolin, and so at this stage we're basically pulling in funds so that we can get this off the ground and get it up and going as quickly as we can.
Private conservation reserves like Makalali are strongly endorsed by anti-poaching units like ProTrack.
So once that's built and once they release the pangolins, they'll be fitted with transmitters, and then our guys on the ground will be physically be able to help tracking them at night and that.
This would be a first for South Africa, but in neighbouring Zimbabwe, since 1994, the Tiki Highwood Trust has developed a successful model for the rehabilitation and release of pangolins that experts believe can be emulated in South Africa.
Zimbabwe has done a fantastic job, and Lisa Highwood and Ellen Colony and the Tiki Highway Trust have been absolutely phenomenal. They work directly with the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife and Police system. There's an open line communication, there's a consultation communication, and it's phenomenal how the magistrates are working collectively with the Tiki Highwood Trust and with the police, and it's working.
So why has it taken the South African conservation world and government so long to rally for greater protection of the species?
Nobody wants to fund pangolin research. Everyone wants to put rhino because rhinos are sexy. Elephant is sexy. Leopard is sexy.
I don't think everybody understood the plight of the pangolin until this COP. The department is now becoming more involved in this, and we will find ways and means to see what our contribution can be towards the conservation of the species. I don't know whether we can financially help, but certainly we can help with information.
I don't trust government will at all. I would if there was an African pangolin working group that was started by the government and we had funds by them and they worked with us and they took it seriously, but they don't. Governments are surfing the rhino and the elephant wave. It's as simple as that.
The future for much of the planet's wildlife looks bleak. By 2020, the number is set to fall by 2/3 due to habitat destruction and the spike in wildlife crimes. Today, the trafficking of endangered species is the 5th most profitable illicit trade in the world, earning up to $10 billion annually.
The problem is, as soon as these animal products have a high commodity, poachers are prepared to risk life and death.
Even after the CITES uplisting, in November this year, several more busts of tons of pangolins trafficked to Indonesia and Thailand.
I feel stronger about prosecuting the person who's buying that animal because you're actually pushing the markets.
And this is the pangolin part that principally drives the international market. A scale that, like the rhino horn, is made up of keratin, the protein that forms our nails. Asian countries have spoken about establishing pangolin breeding farms to service the demand. But you cannot remove a pangolin's scales without killing it.
Pangolins can't be ranched. You can't farm pangolins. You can't have pangolin farmings and then sell out 10 kilograms here and 5 kilograms there. We do not support the captive holding of any pangolin whatsoever. So that means if we can't farm them, we can't utilize them sustainably. End of story.
And surely the battle should not revolve around to trade or not to trade, but rather the survival of our endangered species.
If we're not taking good care of these animals, if we're not protecting them, definitely they will be endangered and possibly become critically endangered. So we need to do something as soon as possible.
South Africa's Department of Environmental Affairs was allocated a budget of just 5.9 billion rand for the 2015-2016 financial year, less than 1% of the national government total. And of that amount, a minuscule percent is allocated to biodiversity conservation.
We do not have a budget specifically for certain species like the pangolin, but we have a budget for species management and conservation, and in terms of my directorate is 8 million. So we must use that for all the enforcement action that we are involved in.
Poaching has got to be dealt with completely away from the rest of the normal judicial system. I think it is that important to get it under control, because that's how we save rhinos, that is how we save pangolins.
You know, we need our specialist units back. We need a magistrate that understands the problem. We need prosecutors that understand the problem and know how to prosecute. We must get our ducks in a row.
In previous episodes, we met private anti-poaching units at the forefront of tackling the illicit trade. And we learned that there was a worrying gap between government policy and practice.
All in all, our legislation is actually quite strong. Where the weaknesses are is in the implementation of that legislation, the compliance from the public that have to comply with the legislation, and then, of course, the enforcement of such legislation.
These guys should be educated, they should be trained. I mean, you can't have a qualified nature conservation official coming to you and say, I have to go to court to testify. How many eggs does a pangolin lay?
We must try to capacitate the institutions. What I'm trying to say here is that sometimes you lose experienced EMIs, and then you've got to train people, and it takes time. It can take up to 3 years for somebody to really, do the job properly.
There are certain things that South Africa have to make sure that we do, such as ensure strict enforcement controls to address the illegal trade, also to strengthen national interagency cooperation as well as international cooperation, also to carry out capacity building activities, also inform the judiciary, hunters, communities, business sector, courier companies, about the conservation status and the threats that the illegal trade pose to the survival of these animals.
But in Limpopo, where several arrests have taken place this year, we were given the assurance by police and the judiciary that pangolin poaching is now a priority crime.
We hand over quality and full evidence to the prosecutor for him or her to be able to put the matter, which is well prosecutable, before the magistrate.
The Zanin trial of Soweto resident and alleged pangolin middleman David Chauke has been postponed until the 6th of December. If convicted, he could face a 10 million rand fine or a 10-year jail sentence.
We are now with the NPA working to put together a database of all the cases that was registered under the police's care system, so that we, have the outcomes, etc., for information. So hopefully in a month or two we will have all that information on cases that went to court and what was the convictions, if there were any.
After CITES COP17, the pangolin is no longer the forgotten species. But is there sufficient government will to conserve it?
As the South African government, we have been conserving and we will keep on and make sure that the pangolin is there for future generations.
Or are we fighting a losing battle?
You don't see these animals. It's been too late for the pangolin for the last 30 years.
Yet here we are, in the eye of the poaching storm, searching for this creature in vain. And just as we had given up all hope, we receive a phone call from anti-poaching crusader Louise Joubert, informing us that she has rescued another trafficked pangolin and is about to set it free, back into the wild. She invites us to film the release.
I'm very much excited, brother. I'm very much excited. As I've said that it would be like a lifetime experience, because I've also never seen it before. It's only now that we're doing this story that I've heard about pangolins, and I believe there are so many people out there who doesn't know about pangolins.
I don't know if we're allowed to touch it. I'd love to touch more than 80 grand worth of endangered species.
We received a call for help sort of 11 o'clock last night with guys telling us that they had poachers on their property. It's not too far away from us, so we offered to send our guys to sit ambush and just wait for the guys to return and arrest them on their return. Unfortunately, the ambushes didn't quite go the way we planned, and the guys managed to run away. But as our guys were pursuing them, they dropped the bag, and the normal weapons they use, like axes and assegais and stuff, but they dropped the bag. And when the guys opened the bag, they found this pangolin inside the bag.
Alexis aptly sums up the exhilaration felt by the special assignment team.
So this is the very exciting and unexpected culmination of this work, that we've been able to get involved in a release of this incredible ancient prehistoric animal.
But already traumatized by its abduction, the pangolin remains tightly curled up in a ball, then slowly unfurls and tries to hide away in the undergrowth. Until Alexis steps in. She cradles it, straining under its weight, and carries it to freedom.
My intention would certainly be to use everything that I have and to make sure that I don't hold anything back in saving the species. And which will be devastating for all of us, if this animal goes extinct, I want to be with it in its last days.